Hi YouTube! Today we're going to start a series about the vertical lines of the majors. So you may have seen some discussion. I think it's a little more common to talk about the horizontal lines, but basically if you lay out the major arcana in 3 rows of 7 cards each, taking out the Fool, so going from the Magician to the World, and you can read certain themes passed in the rows. We're going to be talking about the kind of columns, the vertical lines of the majors, of which there are 7. And specifically, I'm going to use a formula that I got from a Paul Foster Case book. I'm more or less going to use that formula, which, simplified, is kind of how does the first card, the top card in a line, use what's in the second card to resolve the third card. And so, using that formula, we're going to start with the Magician, Strength, and the Devil. So how does the Magician use Strength to resolve the Devil? Okay. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about the Magician. Here's an example from the Lumina Tarot. So the Magician, I really relate to this card. I really relate to them as an archetype. The Magician's actually my birth card, and definitely it clicked. It made sense when I realized that. If we look at the Magician as an archetype, they are all about creating and manifesting. They take what is above, what they sense from above, and immediately turn it into something on Earth with their magic. They're pulling together all 4 of the elements. They're about drive. I think of them as a solar energy. I'm taking that from Tess Giberson, City Witch, who I like lunar and solar because I don't like the tendency to reference human gender in sacred masculine and feminine, and I'm also kind of wary of potential appropriation of using yin and yang, and so Tess uses lunar and solar. I'm going to use those as well. So the Magician has kind of a solar energy, kind of an active energy about will and manifestation, and that is the archetype. But of course, no one person is entirely an archetype. So if we turn the Magician into kind of a character and think about what they might be like outside of all their manifesting, one thing that we might notice is that because the Magician is so defined by what they produce and what they are able to create and manifest, then I think their reaction to shadow work or to their fears, to their anxieties, is probably to avoid and push it aside and, keep it over there. I got shit to do. I'm not going to do a lot of self-exploration. The Magician is very much an ego-ruled card. They're the first card in the line of the majors, so they are very much in their ego still. And I can see the Magician kind of having some very black and white views, maybe. So the Magician is all about, listening for what's above and channeling the divine. Then I can see the Magician's take on the Devil being kind of devil bad, divine good, kind of binary thinking. If the Devil is the opposite of the above from which the Magician channels, then the Magician doesn't want anything to do with the Devil. And I think if this character that I'm coming up with as the Magician is using strength, what does that mean? And I really like Lindsay Mack uses this phrase that I really love for strength, which is approaching your fear with an undefended heart. I really like that phrase, undefended heart. So what does that mean for the magician? Well, it means that they are, if they were to face their fears, if they were to face the things that they put aside, not with all the barriers of the ego, not with all the kind of layers of extra stuff, extra defense mechanisms, extra kind of ego voice, that the magician probably has a lot of. If they were to let that, gently push to the side, it's doing kind of a little bit of a lunar dive. It's this solar character. What happens if this solar character engages their lunar side, engages their intuition, their deep inner knowing, does a little dive into below, what results from that? And, to me, like the Devil card, one thing that it's all about, and sorry, the light is not great today for this card, but I really like this version of the card because it is very kind of shadowy and like indistinct. And I think one thing the Devil is about is kind of recognizing your false beliefs and like what is the chatter, what is the kind of monkey mind, the ego voice that you're constantly hearing. And so this idea of the magician as being an ego-driven character, I think would constantly have that voice being like, you have to work harder, you fear of failure, like you are what you produce. And so if you don't produce, like what will happen to you? That kind of like fear of the unknown of what happens if I'm not able to produce, maybe like fear of becoming disabled, fear of depression, like all of those things I can see the magician really like trying to shove aside and not think about. But I think like if the magician kind of identifies themselves, or maybe over identifies with productivity, there's also something in there about like reputation and status. And so when you face your fears with an undefended heart, like in the Strength card, you realize what is real, like what is a valid thing that you really should fear, and what like might jeopardize your survival, versus what are the judgments, what are the trappings that society has taught you, like what parts of your kind of monkey mind, often a lot of your monkey mind is going to be those external ideas about what is true. And so the working with the Devil strips all that away. And I think like the idea of using Strength to work with the Devil is really interesting, because it is about this like just gonna jump right into this card and not defend myself. And like I said, I really identify with the magician. I think that, I have definitely had times in my life where, and still am having those, where like I feel defined by my productivity. So I really resonate with this, the idea that like I am what I create, rather than having a core self that is me that cannot be challenged or cannot be destroyed. I think, if you're in that space, one of the fears is that if you jump in with an undefended heart, then not you'll be killed literally, but like that your soul will be crushed. That like if I jump in and I don't defend myself and I, face the fear of failure, like everything, I will have no livelihood. I will have nothing. Like that's the fear. And there are parts of that that are totally reasonable, but I think there are other parts of that that are overblown, and that you'll find that you have something, that there is a core to yourself far beyond your productivity. And like another thing that I think the magician can realize in taking this journey is, if we think of the magician as an archetype of kind of maybe having very binary thinking, that it's both, it's not just, if we use strength together with the devil, it's not just facing fear with an undefended heart, but it's actually facing the devil themselves. It's facing that idea of the devil. And what the magician can learn from that is that there is no real like good evil binary, that the idea of that binary is a false belief itself, that the idea of the devil as this scary, like heretical, whatever, like boogeyman, is actually an idea and a concept that is used to control people. So it is used by society, by religion, to control, to keep you, like whether it's productive, like the magician is, like to keep you productive, to keep you on the spiritual track that certain people have dictated for you. This fear is created of this devil figure and of like the idea of sin. And so the really, like the most powerful thing almost the magician can do is to make friends with the devil. Because when the magician recognizes that the devil is not out to get them, that it's the idea of the devil that is scary. The devil itself is not scary. The devil represents the magician's kind of inner wildness. And I love that. Like, I love the idea that the magician is like very structured and ordered, creating things and like pulling things down and like, doesn't really pause. But that deep down the magician has the wildness that all of us have within them. And so, the confronting the devil is about confronting one's own wildness. Maybe the magician has some fears about parts of themselves that are shameful, whether that's like kinky desires, whether that's queerness or polyamory or something else that is not a core part of the magician's identity, or gets hidden maybe because of the idea that the magician is only what they produce and the magician's value doesn't come from their wildness. When they meet the devil, they also are exposed to the idea that like they're bringing the monsters under the bed into the light, and they're understanding that the shame is created externally, and in fact their wildness is beautiful. These parts of themselves are part of their core identity, that they're beautiful, and that they're what make the magician awesome. Like they're what turns our character of the magician from an archetype into a fully fledged person. So I love this liberatory strain of the devil, that, it is kind of a like, it's like what they don't want you to know, is that your wellness can be amazing and powerful and freeing, and that it is not actually the devil, that the false beliefs about that wildness, that's the devil in the sense of like the scary controlling beast. So yeah, I think there is like a connection between these two things, like between the kind of productivity element of the magician and the idea of liberation with the devil, in the sense that like I think for me, like the devil in that kind of boogeyman sense is sometimes laziness. Like the fear is laziness, is being unproductive. I mean, it's funny, I actually have a series on this very channel called Unproductive, which is kind of cheeky, but like it is an actual fear I have. Like, what does it mean to be unproductive? What does it mean to be lazy? And that comes in with like a lot of ableism, internalized ableism, a lot of stuff. But like, if that is the fear, that in facing that fear with an undefended heart, like, how is that liberatory? How does that, how could that potentially free me to understand bigger truths, and like to stop being so recriminating towards myself. So yeah, that is our first journey into the vertical lines of the majors. I would love to hear what you think in the comments. How do you think of these three cards in relation to one another? And of course, if you enjoy this kind of tarot content, I do try to post a tarot related video once a week, so don't forget to like and subscribe.